I've got some troubling news about England's royal family.
Catherine had entered Prince George's private study, expecting nothing more alarming than an unfinished school assignment. Instead, behind a narrow bookcase beside his desk, she found a tiny black recording device pulsing with a faint green light. It had been positioned deliberately. It had been active recently. And as the Princess of Wales stood frozen with the device in her hand, one terrifying realization overwhelmed every royal concern. Someone had been listening to her son. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Catherine did not shout. She did not call for guards. She stared at the device, then at the chair beside George's desk, where he often sat with William and spoke about school, duty, and a future he was too young to understand. The royal study was more than a classroom. It was the private room where George began learning what it meant to become heir, the child expected one day to inherit the crown. She had entered because several books near the wall had been moved. George had insisted he had not touched them. Now Catherine understood why that detail had unsettled her. The miniature recorder had been hidden behind the shelf and angled toward the chair where father and son held their quietest conversations. George appeared at the doorway before she could hide it. Catherine gripped the desk, forced calm into her voice, and asked whether he had spoken to anyone in the room recently. His face tightened. He looked from her to the device and asked if someone had been listening. She crossed the room, knelt beside him, and told him he had done nothing wrong. The answer comforted him for only a second. Catherine examined the casing without touching its controls. A removable memory component sat beneath the battery cover, and no palace security mark appeared anywhere on the device. That absence mattered. Approved protection equipment was logged, numbered, and monitored. This recorder belonged to no official system. Then she noticed the scratch on the window latch. A strip of adhesive clung beneath the shelf. Someone had not acted in haste. The room had been entered, tested, and prepared in stages. Catherine placed the device inside an empty jewelry box, locked the study, and refused to summon an aide. She carried the box herself through the corridor to William. The moment he saw it, the prince did not ask what it was. He recognized its construction. Catherine believed she had brought William a frightening discovery, but the silence that crossed his face revealed something worse. The prince had seen equipment like it before. William did not ask where Catherine had found the device. He did not need to. The sight of the tiny transmitter lying inside the jewelry box drained the warmth from his expression. As George waited upstairs, unaware of the storm gathering around him, William closed the door, lowered his voice, and told Catherine that the device resembled surveillance equipment once demonstrated during a confidential palace security briefing. The prince lifted it carefully, studying the casing without disturbing the memory component. George's study was not merely a room for schoolwork. It was where the young heir discussed lessons, travel arrangements, royal duties, and the fears he could not express in public. An heir was the person next in line to inherit the crown. But Catherine saw something more vulnerable than succession. She saw a child beginning to understand that part of his future already belonged to strangers. Catherine felt the guilt before William voiced any suspicion. She had encouraged George to speak freely in that room. She had promised him that behind its closed door, he could admit confusion, weakness, even resentment. Now those private words might exist in someone else's hands. William began speaking about containment. The word came quickly, almost automatically. He mentioned restricted access, internal security, and preventing panic inside the household. Yet he had not asked whether George was frightened. Catherine placed both palms against the table. Before this becomes a palace crisis, it is our son's crisis. The words stopped him. William looked away, and for one painful moment, the future king disappeared beneath the father, who knew he had chosen duty before comfort. When he finally spoke again, his voice was softer. He explained that the transmitter had been designed for close-range collection. It could record for a limited period, but someone would likely need repeated access to retrieve its contents or replace its power source. That meant the intruder had not simply entered once and vanished. Whoever had planted it may have returned. William turned the casing beneath the light and found several threads trapped near the battery seal. The fabric was pale blue. It could have come from a glove, a uniform, a folder, or even ceremonial clothing. The clue was small, but it carried a terrible implication. The person responsible may have moved comfortably inside royal surroundings. Later, Catherine found George sitting silently beside his bed. He asked whether someone wanted to hear him make mistakes. She fought back tears and told him no private fear could make him smaller, weaker, or less worthy. He leaned against her, but the question remained between them. Downstairs, William opened the study's access log. One unexplained entry appeared on the night of a highly sensitive family gathering. The discovery was no longer limited to a hidden machine. It now pointed toward a particular night when nearly every senior royal had been under the same roof. 3 weeks before Catherine found the device, Windsor had hosted a private constitutional dinner intended to prepare George for the changing shape of royal duty. The gathering had seemed formal but harmless. Yet one moment from that evening now returned with chilling clarity. After George left his study, a disagreement erupted in the corridor. The security officer assigned to the private wing was called away, and the study door remained unguarded for exactly 11 minutes. Charles had invited only a restricted group: William, Catherine, George, several senior advisors, and palace officials trusted with the monarchy's most sensitive planning. A constitutional dinner was a private meeting where royal responsibilities, succession, and future duties were discussed away from the public. For George, however, it was not simply another lesson. It was the first time he had been asked to explain what monarchy meant to his own generation. The young prince spoke carefully. He told William and Charles that duty should make people feel protected, not distant. His father listened with quiet pride, while the king studied every word with the intensity of a monarch measuring the future. Catherine noticed George's nervousness, but she also saw his relief when the conversation ended. He had offered them something honest. He believed it would remain private. Then the tension broke. After George left the study, Charles told William that the boy should begin receiving confidential state briefings sooner than planned. Such briefings were private explanations of national matters given to senior royals so they could understand future responsibilities. William refused. He insisted that George needed time to grow before the crown consumed every part of his life. Their voices rose. "The crown never waits for childhood to end," Charles said. William stared at his father, wounded and furious. To the king, the words carried hard-earned truth. To the prince, they sounded like a sentence being passed on his son. The security officer assigned to the corridor moved toward the argument, leaving George's door exposed. Catherine remained several steps away, unsettled by the bitterness between them. That was when she noticed a palace aide standing beside the unguarded study with a pale blue document folder pressed against his chest. She looked toward William when he answered the king. When she looked back, the aide had vanished. Now the access record gave that memory terrifying weight. During those 11 unguarded minutes, the study door had opened once. The entry appeared under a generic maintenance credential, a temporary pass normally issued for approved repairs or technical inspections. No maintenance had been scheduled. Worse, the credential had been erased before midnight. Catherine understood that the argument had created more than a family fracture. It had created an opening. Someone had used the division between Charles and William to enter George's safest room without challenge. She remembered the blue folder, the missing aide, and the deleted access pass. Then she decided who must answer first. The trail now led away from the device itself and toward a senior figure whose authority reached every locked door in the royal household. Catherine entered the private operations room, carrying the sealed jewelry box, and placed it in front of Sir Malcolm Vale, the royal household security director. No aides were present, no secretaries were taking notes. When he suggested that the matter should be transferred quietly into palace procedure, she pushed the box closer and asked one devastating question. Was my son being protected by this household or studied by it? Sir Malcolm did not answer at once. He controlled internal access credentials, temporary security permissions, private wing staffing, and the first stage of any investigation inside the royal household. That authority gave him access to every locked door and every name behind it. Catherine knew that once the device entered his system, the truth could be classified, contained, or delayed before the family understood what had happened. Vale lowered his voice and insisted that secrecy was necessary to protect George. He warned that uncontrolled questions could expose the young prince to greater danger. Catherine heard the threat beneath the concern. If she resisted, the palace could paint her as emotional, reckless, and unwilling to follow security procedure. William urged everyone to remain calm. Catherine turned toward him immediately. She told the prince that he was already speaking like a future king managing a scandal, not a father protecting his son. The words struck hard. William stiffened, but he did not deny them. He had spent his life learning how institutions survived. She was forcing him to confront what survival might cost. Sir Malcolm reached for the jewelry box. Catherine placed her hand over the lid. Her fingers trembled, but her voice did not. She refused to release the evidence until he named every person who had received a temporary credential on the night of the constitutional dinner. A temporary credential was a short-term security pass issued for limited access to restricted royal areas. Such passes were meant to leave a clear record. Vale looked at William, hoping for support. The prince said nothing. Finally, the security director admitted that 3 credentials had been created. 2 recipients appeared in the official log. The third did not. That pass had bypassed written authorization and had been requested through the office of a senior royal. The silence changed. William saw Catherine's hand shaking over the box and moved beside her, no longer standing between his wife and the institution. He told Vale that no evidence would leave the room without their approval, and that no name would be protected by rank. Sir Malcolm understood the choice before him. Then he revealed which office had requested the missing credential. It came through the king's household. Catherine had expected to uncover an intruder, but the unauthorized access had been granted through the king's own household. Charles read the access report alone before summoning William and Catherine. He did not deny that his office had requested the temporary credential. Instead, the king removed his glasses, placed the document flat against the desk, and admitted that he had authorized a private assessment of George's constitutional preparedness. But he insisted he had never approved surveillance. The distinction mattered to the monarch. To Catherine, it changed almost nothing. Charles held the authority to commission private evaluations concerning succession planning, royal readiness, and threats surrounding the direct heir. Succession planning meant preparing for how royal duties and responsibilities would pass from one generation to the next. He believed such power existed to protect the crown from uncertainty. William believed it had just been used to reach around him as a father. The king explained that his office had hired an outside constitutional consultant to observe how George was being introduced to duty. The arrangement had not been shared fully with William or Catherine. That secrecy created an unofficial channel into the young prince's life, one controlled by advisors rather than his parents. Charles defended the decision as preparation for a burden George could never escape. William's restraint finally cracked. He told his father that inevitability did not give the palace ownership over his son's childhood. Catherine remained quieter, but her question cut deeper. Did you ever consider how he would feel knowing adults were secretly judging the things he said in confidence? Charles opened his mouth, then stopped. For the first time, the monarch could not hide behind duty. He had imagined reports, recommendations, and measured conclusions. He had not imagined George asking whether his mistakes had been recorded. The king reached for a pen and pulled forward an order closing the inquiry until the matter could be contained. Catherine calmly removed the unsigned paper from beneath his hand. "The investigation remains open," she said. Charles looked at her, stunned by the shift in power. Catherine did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The monarch then revealed that the consultant had been allowed to observe selected lessons, but had never received permission to enter the study alone. William demanded the contract. A handwritten amendment appeared near the final page. It authorized the collection of supplementary behavioral material, meaning private evidence intended to assess George beyond formal lessons. The initials beside the change did not belong to Charles. The king stared at them and recoiled. Someone had used his authority, his office, and his belief in preparation to justify something far darker. Worse, the altered contract pointed toward a trusted member of the royal household who had attended the constitutional dinner and understood the division between father, son, and grandson. The king's authority had opened the door, but another hand had pushed the operation far beyond anything he had approved. By sunrise, the private household was no longer functioning as one institution. Staff passes were suspended. Offices were sealed. Long-serving aides were questioned behind closed doors. Yet the deepest fracture appeared inside the family itself. William stopped sharing George's schedule with the king's office. Catherine moved all 3 children's lessons into secured rooms, and Charles discovered that a decision made in the name of continuity had placed him outside his grandson's circle of trust. William ordered an immediate review of every person who had entered the private family wing during the previous 6 months. The private wing was the restricted part of the royal residence reserved for the family's personal rooms and protected daily life. Every temporary pass, maintenance visit, and unexplained delay now carried suspicion. Men and women trusted for years suddenly faced questions they had never expected to hear. Catherine made a different decision. She removed George from formal constitutional tutorials and suspended the timetable that had once seemed so urgent. Those lessons were designed to prepare an heir for future duties, but she no longer cared what the palace calendar demanded. Her son's sense of safety came first. George refused to return to the study. He stopped at the doorway and stared toward the exposed space behind the bookcase. Then he asked whether the room would ever feel like his again. Catherine wanted to promise that it would. The words would not come. Across the household, Charles received formal notice that William had ended the sharing of George's schedule with the king's private secretariat, the office that manages the monarch's official correspondence and planning. He read the message twice. Then he placed it beside the unsigned order that would have closed the inquiry and said nothing. Camilla found him there alone. The queen watched the king struggle beneath the weight of a decision he had once called necessary. Charles looked at her and admitted the truth he had avoided. "I thought I was preparing him. I may have taught him not to trust me." The investigation grew darker that afternoon. Specialists recovered broken fragments of audio from the device. George could be heard speaking about his fear of disappointing William and his anxiety over becoming king. Catherine listened for 7 seconds. Then she stopped the recording. Hearing her son's private fear transformed into evidence left her shaken. But the second voice changed that pain into fury. Someone had tested the device after installing it. The words were distorted, yet the speaker used an internal security phrase known only to senior household staff. One palace employee recognized the cadence. The voice, he said, sounded like Sir Malcolm Vale's deputy, Adrian Mercer. The investigation finally had a name, but Catherine would soon learn that Adrian Mercer had not acted merely for information. He had been building leverage. Catherine asked to speak with Adrian Mercer without security officers, lawyers, or royal advisors in the room. William objected, but she understood that another formal interrogation would produce another carefully managed denial. Mercer entered expecting a princess protected by protocol. Instead, he found a mother seated across from him with the recording device on the table and George's handwritten school notes resting beside it. Adrian had served as deputy director of household security, a role that gave him knowledge of temporary credentials, surveillance equipment, and the coded language used during internal emergencies. He had also advised the outside constitutional consultant hired to assess George's preparation. That placed him inside both sides of the operation, the system protecting the family and the process judging the young heir. Catherine did not begin with accusation. She asked him why he had listened to a child discussing fears shared only with his parents. Mercer answered carefully. He claimed that George's anxiety represented a future national risk. In his mind, hesitation in an heir could become weakness in a king, and weakness at the center of the monarchy could threaten the institution itself. Catherine held his gaze. "Fear does not make a child weak," she said. "Exploiting it makes an adult dangerous." The words stripped away every excuse. Mercer shifted toward procedure, but Catherine refused to let him hide inside official language. He insisted that he had acted to protect continuity. She reminded him that continuity meant the stable passage of royal responsibility from one generation to the next. It did not mean turning a child's private emotions into a weapon. Catherine then gave the signal. William entered. The prince wanted to threaten him. Every instinct demanded anger. Instead, he asked the question that mattered most. Had any recordings been copied? Mercer's silence became the answer before his confession did. He admitted installing the device to collect material that could pressure William into accelerating George's formal preparation. The recordings were never meant for a newspaper, a foreign government, or an outside enemy. No distant force had commissioned the operation. The danger had come from within. Mercer believed the monarchy had to be protected from the family's emotions, especially from a father's instinct to shield his son. He had treated love as interference and fear as evidence. Catherine slid George's handwritten notes across the table. "Read that line." Mercer looked down. "My family is where I feel safe." He spoke the first words, then stopped. For the first time, the man who had justified everything through duty could not complete a child's sentence. His confession gave William enough evidence to act publicly, but truth carried its own danger. Exposing Mercer meant admitting that the palace had failed, not at its gates, but at its heart. The family had recovered the truth, but protecting George now required them to reveal the institution's failure before someone else revealed it for them. At 6 o'clock the next morning, the palace released a statement confirming that an unauthorized recording device had been discovered inside a room used by Prince George. The wording was measured. The reaction was not. Within minutes, broadcasters abandoned scheduled programming, newspaper presses were halted, and crowds began gathering outside Windsor Castle. What had started as a private act against one child had become a national reckoning over the limits of royal power. William and Catherine had approved every line before publication. The statement confirmed the device, Adrian Mercer's dismissal, the internal security breach, and the destruction of all recovered copies. An internal security breach meant that the danger had come from someone already trusted with access, not from an outsider forcing entry. That single fact changed the entire story. The threat had not crossed the palace gates. It had grown behind them. Charles accepted responsibility for authorizing the poorly controlled assessment that gave Mercer his opportunity. The king did not claim he had ordered the surveillance. He admitted something more painful. His decision had created the opening. By morning, the Daily Chronicle carried a stark image of Windsor Castle beneath one brutal headline. Who was listening to George? The question spread faster than any official answer. A BBC presenter described the scandal as a failure not of walls or locks, but of judgment. The phrase was repeated across the country because it captured the deepest wound. The palace had possessed guards, coded doors, and restricted corridors. None of them had protected a child from the ambitions of trusted adults. Supporters gathered outside Windsor carrying handwritten signs that read, "Let him be a child." Public anger began turning into something softer and more powerful: solidarity with George. Charles recorded a brief message acknowledging that duty could never justify invading a child's private trust. His voice remained steady until he spoke George's name. Then it faltered. The palace confirmed that Mercer had acted alone in planting the device, but he had not operated inside a vacuum. Senior officials were removed for allowing unchecked authority, ignoring missing records, and permitting access logs to be deleted. George watched part of the coverage beside Catherine. When he saw the signs outside Windsor, he asked whether the people were angry with him. She drew closer. "They are standing beside you," she said. For the first time since the discovery, he seemed to believe that the shame belonged somewhere else. The public truth had been established. The guilty man had been named. The institution had admitted failure. Yet one decision remained beyond statements, dismissals, and national judgment. George still had to decide whether the room where his trust had been broken could ever feel safe again. Britain had delivered its judgment on the breach, but the story could only end where it began, inside George's abandoned study. Several days after the confession, Catherine opened the door to George's study and waited without asking him to enter. The bookcase had been removed. The walls had been inspected. Every device, wire, lock, and access record had been replaced, yet none of that could restore what had been taken. Only George could decide whether the room still belonged to fear or whether he was ready to claim it as his own again. Mercer had been permanently removed from royal service. His security clearance, the official permission allowing access to protected places and information, had been revoked. The system that permitted temporary entry without naming the person responsible was abolished. William and Catherine would never again be forced to trust a blank record where a human name should have appeared. Charles signed a binding family protocol giving George's parents sole authority over his private education, personal rooms, and childhood records. The protocol was a formal written agreement defining who could make decisions and who could not. For the king, the signature marked more than reform. It was an admission that royal power had crossed a line. Charles then met George alone. The monarch did not defend his intentions. He did not speak about continuity, preparation, or duty. He told his grandson that preparing someone for the crown never gave anyone the right to steal their trust. George listened, but forgiveness did not come easily. He asked the king to promise that no lesson about monarchy would ever again matter more than telling him the truth. Charles gave that promise. Then he placed the old access credential on the desk, lifted a pair of scissors, and cut the pass in half. He left both pieces beside George, allowing the child who had been watched to hold the final symbol of the system that had failed him. William faced his own mistake. The prince admitted that he had first treated the discovery as a security emergency, instead of recognizing his son's fear. Catherine took his hand. Protecting George, she made clear, required honesty from both parents, not just stronger locks. Investigators later confirmed, through a documented final report, that every recording and duplicate had been recovered and destroyed. No private audio remained in circulation. No additional devices were found. George finally stepped into the study. He walked to the desk, sat in his usual chair, and opened a fresh notebook. Catherine remained near the doorway until he looked up and asked her to come inside. The hidden device had exposed a dangerous belief, that preserving the crown could excuse violating those destined to carry it. Catherine destroyed that belief. George would still be prepared for kingship, but never again at the cost of his childhood, dignity, or safety. The monarchy survived because a mother refused to let royal authority become stronger than family trust. The recording device had been designed to capture George's private voice, but in the end, it was Catherine's refusal to remain silent that changed the crown forever. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.